Many times if it's just rolling, you know, when you're not really thinking, that's always the best. It really is. That's why I don't like to map out exactly where we're going to go. That's why it took us 8 weeks to get through 27 pages. I was just looking at that and saying, 8 weeks, here we are. But no, as a matter of fact, what I was going to do, and I don't know whether we'll do this or not, how much we'll do it, but I thought we'll do a quick little review before we move on from page 27. Because to me, all that we've been building in these 8 weeks is the foundation. And I think each of us knows enough about construction to know that if we don't build a solid foundation, what we have later is not going to last. Mm-hmm. You know, your building's going to come tumbling down at some point if the foundation's not solid. And this is one of the things that I saw when they asked Jesus about the end, and he sent them to the beginning. He said, have you discovered the beginning? You got to know the beginning. If you don't know the beginning, you're sure not going to know what's going on down the road. So that's why we've spent so much time on this, and I want to make sure that we're all in agreement on the same page. We can disagree with anything's being presented. That's not a problem. I don't have a problem with that. What I would like to do is make sure that we all understand and we can see what we're talking about. Then we can decide whether we agree or disagree. Many times what happens, we react to things and disagree with things before we even know what's going on. You know what I mean? That's human nature. And that's pretty much in every given moment. That's why I say, you know, what I experienced today, I reacted to rather than interacted. And we all know when you're reacting because you feel moved. You know, I felt triggered. If you feel triggered in any way, you know you're reacting rather than interacting. You know, no one has to come and tell you, hey, you just had a reaction. You know you did. I know I did. And I also know that it was there for a reason, and it was perfect, as everything is. So we can let go of it, or we can dwell in it. Right? So actually, namaste, everybody, by the way. Namaste. Yeah, I think that's good. We should probably always go back to reminding ourselves. So before we really get into going further, I did want to go back over, because I felt this is so vitally important, the moment of choice in the Garden of Eden, the 2 trees, the choice, moment of choice. Tree of life, we've heard this story many times now, if not outside of here, we've heard it here many times. The tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And when we look at the tree of knowledge of good and evil, I think it's very, very helpful to remember. It doesn't say the tree of evil. It doesn't say the tree of life and the tree of evil. That's vitally important. See what it says? The tree of life, the tree of knowledge of good and evil.
Most of which sounds like good things. Knowledge is a good thing. Good is a good thing.
Doesn't it sound good?
Knowledge of good and evil, you think that's something we need, but.
And this is one of the reasons why I would say that the majority of people are very, very confused about this. They're very confused about the nature of God. You know, because we always associate God as being good. God's good.
Well, right? You could change that tree of knowledge of good and evil to say tree of knowledge of duality, because that's basically what it is.
Yeah, but I quoted it as it's quoted in the Bible, okay? Mm-hmm. But you could say duality. You could say that, okay? But now we look over here, this is the tree of life, and I like to call the tree of knowledge of good and evil, or the tree of knowledge of duality, the tree of death. I like to say, let's call this the tree of life, let's call this the tree of death. Because God said, if you choose this one, you're going to die.
To be honest, I never heard it called good and evil with my Catholic upbringing.
Because you never looked at the Bible from being
From being
Catholic.
Catholic, right.
Yeah.
Well,
That's
I
what it
always
is.
heard it, I did hear it.
You did hear it called that?
Me too. Yeah.
Okay.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
I did.
No, it's in that, and if we go get one of the Bibles, it's in there, just like that.
I'll be
Tree
done.
of knowledge of good and evil. So what I
It
did,
was an apple tree.
earlier I went on the internet.
The apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
That was the-
I went on the internet to get some definitions of some. I didn't dig too deep. I just went to Merriam online. All right, and I looked up life, and I took just a few things off of there that I thought might help give us clarity. And one of the couple of the definitions that I got was the quality that distinguishes a vital and functional being from a dead body. Wait a minute.
That's a definition of what?
Life.
The quality that distinguishes a vital and functioning being from a dead body. Yeah. Okay? Spiritual existence transcending physical death. That's another definition that was in there. Another one, the form or pattern of something existing in reality. So those are all definitions of this side of life. Then I went on the other side and I looked up death. Simple, the end of life. Okay, that was one good one.
That says it all.
That says it all. The cause of loss of life. The state of being dead. That's death, the state of being dead. Now also, I looked up unified and separated, because these are also important. Because in terms of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, as Mickey indicated, we're talking about duality.
No, I've been selling.
So what is duality but separating things, right?
And,
That's duality. We're taking something that's unified and we're separating it.
her sister.
Like for example,
Every time
let's take hot and cold.
that's what it is with Scott.
What do we got? Hot and cold. And we got
She said yes with her.
a thermometer.
Somebody.
And on one side we've got cold, on this side we've got hot, and then we got degrees. But what are we doing? We're separating something that's interconnected, right? It's all interconnected. It's just opposite sides of the one thing. Temperature.
Right.
We got a temperature. On this side we got that, on that side we got that, but it's still temperature. So we're splitting it up and we're looking at it dualistically. So unified is a unit or a coherent whole. Right? A unit or a coherent whole. So on this side, we've got the tree of life, which is love, and I'm going to put God. Spirit. It's a unified whole. It's all one.
If you saw the whole.
On this side, we're going to put the ego in, because it takes the ego
See how much prettier?
to separate it into good and evil.
You gave an example of sort of opposites and showed how they're really interconnected part of this same unified whole in the way of temperature. Are there any things that are, is that true of everything? I mean, I think of black and white, well, that's the spectrum of color. That's all colors or absence of colors, just the degrees in between. Are all things interconnected and really no opposites? There really is no duality of anything?
There you are. Now you look, the Course in Miracles says, only love is real. Okay? Only the love is real. Now the Bible says this. There is no fear in love. Okay? There's no fear in love. So now if we look at the Course in Miracles, the Course in Miracles says, only the love is real, and anything other than love is not real, it's an illusion. Doesn't mean we can't experience an illusion. We all have our moments when we go into things with our ego mind. Now the moment you entertain the ego mind, you automatically have split things into dualistic terms. Automatic. Guess what happens? You have the death experience, just like God promised. God promised Adam and Eve, you're going to die if you do this. But death, the separated state, does it really exist? You just answered the question. It doesn't exist. Life and death cannot both exist. Life exists, yes, and life is infinite. Therefore, death, as we understand death, it can't be a permanent condition. It has to be a temporary state that we experience, which it is. It's temporary. And this is why we read somewhere, I don't even remember now where it was. Jesus said, actually it wasn't even Jesus said this. It says it in the Bible. By man came death, by man, choosing through the ego mind to look at things this way. So by man had to come the resurrection from the dead. Well, how do you resurrect from it if it's permanent? You can't. Right? So if you resurrect from it, in other words, wait a minute, I'm asleep, I wake up. Now when you wake up, what's left? The unified whole. That's what true reality is about. True reality is a unified whole where there's no separation. God alone exists. We live, breathe, and have our being in the body of God. What's not true? Everything that goes on in here. Everything that goes on in our mind relative to any judgment we hold. That's not true. Like I explained in the situation that I created for myself this afternoon, and it was not based on a reality, it was based on an assumption that I was holding. I created the need to remind myself not to look at things that way. And the universe is very, very, very accommodating and give me something that was what I needed. Whether it's upsetting or not upsetting, that again is up to us. And how long we stay upset with that moment is up to us. Someone pisses us off, I'll tell you what, you can go down that road and you can keep going and going and going and going. Like I've explained to you about the situation I had with my uncle that I carried for years, but then the moment you let it go, it's gone. You know? We do this to ourselves. We do it to ourselves, but there's a reason for all of that happening, and the reason is to give us the chance to see something. Because if we don't go down and have an experience and evaluate that moment and change our mind, we'll never experience something greater. We can't go back and have that experience of the unified whole. You know, because it's up to us. These are choices we make. No one does anything to anybody in creation. And that's something else that the Course in Miracles talks about that I'm in direct agreement with. There are no victims and there are no villains. Wow. Really? No victims, no villains. Tell that to somebody who just got robbed out of their paycheck this week. Somebody came up behind them and put a gun to their head and just took all their money. Tell them that there's no such thing as a victim. Yeah. No, to that person, they were a victim and there was a villain and they want to get even. Whatever the I mean, and we can go on and on with all kinds of examples, but you get the gist of it. You know what So
I've come to believe that term, and I come between your class and listen to the universe, or no, not listen to the universe. the disappearance of the universe, which goes over the Course of Miracles. And between the two, I fully understand that now. I did, I mean, a year ago I didn't, but I do now. And I buy into it. It makes sense. It's the only logic I've ever heard.
Well, that's good. I mean, it's good it makes sense to you, because in reality, that's it. I mean, God is love. God is that which never changes. So God did not create death. It would be impossible for God to create death. Can't be done. God did not create suffering. It's impossible for an unconditionally loving God to create suffering. Did anybody ever experience something where they felt they were suffering a little? I think maybe, yeah. Sometimes we blame God for, whatever's going on, but God didn't create that. What creates that is our judgment. Our judgment, by seeing things dualistically as good and evil, and through our judgment we create an attachment. To something. Even if it's a belief system. Whatever it is, we have an attachment to something.
So if we give up our judgments, we could cure all of our life's problems? Is that where that theory leads?
Let me say this. If you give up all of your attachments, you will become, let me say this now. This is what Christians are really looking for. You'll become reborn. By man came death. What is the death? What is death rooted in? Where did it come from? Adam and Eve kill you? No. Did God kill you? No. Every thought you have is killing you. Every thought you have that is based on dualistic terms is killing you. That's why Paul said he dies on a daily basis. He said, I die on a daily basis. I can't get away from these human thoughts.
By killing us, do you mean the cumulative effect of stress that wears out our body?
Well, that's going to happen to the physical. I'm not talking that. I'm talking spiritual death. You're having a spiritual death the moment you look at things and entertain things in dualistic terms. You're already dead. That's it. Done. Finished. Right now. That's why it says in the Bible.
Which is not permanent.
I'm sorry?
Which is not permanent.
Of course not. No. No.
Which is why you could die on a daily basis.
That's why you could die on a daily basis. You could die every second, never mind daily. You could go from life and death, back and forth, back and forth. You could do this for all of eternity. I mean, we can, literally. We have the right, and we have free will, that is God's given right for us to choose to see things dualistically as long as we want. We can be good judges for all of eternity.
That'd be kind of depressing. Wouldn't it be trapped in that rat race for all of eternity?
Look around you.
Yeah.
Look around this world. You look at this world.
Yeah.
What do you see? Do you see enlightened beings? Or do you see people that are trapped in viewing things in dualistic terms? They're trapped, literally.
So our way out of the rat race or off the treadmill is to transcend that and stop the judgment, step out of that, and
there you go. Which is weird.
Which makes you pretty lonely.
Yeah, well, you remember that joke about Mother Teresa in heaven, and then she went to heaven and she's sitting there with God and she says she's hungry, and God says, okay, well, here's a can of tuna, open it up. And they had a can of tuna, and she looks down in hell and she sees the big banquet going on, and so she gets hungry a little bit later and she says, hey, I'm hungry again. He opens up another can of tuna, and so she looks down, she sees another big banquet going on in hell. So she says to God, hey, how come they're having the big banquet and all we get is tuna? And God says, well, I figured it's too much trouble to cook for just two.
These guys has a humor.
The majority of people are seeing things dualistically. Almost every single person you encounter, if you find somebody that doesn't see things as good and evil, I'd love to meet that person. I mean, not that they don't exist in the world, but there are not too many out there.
And maybe they're all off somewhere else having a nicer experience than what we're doing.
They're in another, remember this, there are worlds upon worlds, as Christ said. There are dimensions within dimensions. This particular frequency that we are in right now is perfect for its purpose. People are here, souls are here to evolve and to grow. Well, they're not going to grow into transcending good and evil attachments if they don't have the opportunity to deal with moments that are going to give them that opportunity. My gift today, as I shared, my gift today was being presented with an opportunity to either react or interact. I reacted. Okay? Could have had V8. I got caught. All right. But I got caught. It's all right. Now always is. And later we're going to talk about the difference between now and linear time and so on and so on and so on. We're only trapped as long as we choose to be trapped. We're only caught. When Christ was here, Jesus said to his disciples, you guys are all of the world, I'm not. Right? Then at the end of his ministry, now he spent a lot of time with his apostles, and he was teaching them and training them and helping them see that which they didn't see. And at the end of his ministry, he prayed to the Father. And it was interesting, if you read how he prayed, all of this makes perfect sense. He said this, Father, I pray for those you've given me. They're no longer of the world. He said, I don't pray you change the world. I'm not praying for the world. So I'm not praying for the world. I'm praying for those you've given me. He said, because they're no longer of the world. Now what changed in those individuals? They're still in the body. They're still walking, talking, drinking their wine, most likely. You know. What happened was,
Change your beliefs.
they went to starting to see this as opposed to seeing this. They're no longer of the world. They let go of their attachments. They stopped judging. The ones who really got it. I'm not going to say who got it, who didn't. But the ones who got it were no longer of a judgmental mind, thereby releasing their attachment to the world and becoming reborn. That's what Christ came here to do, was to save people, as you indicated. Wow, that would be terrible to just go on for all of eternity having this experience. Well, guess what? Most people are doing that.
Lifetime after lifetime after
Lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. So how can you be saved from that? Now, if judgment is the key that is creating the situation, how do you reverse the situation?
Do not judge.
Do not judge. So what did Jesus say? Look, I'm going to give you a commandment. This is my commandment. Just love. Love without judgment.
Well, and the Course in Miracles, from my understanding, they surround the word forgive.
I'm sorry?
Forgiveness.
Okay, there's a step. Now, the Course in Miracles, if you read the Course in Miracles, the Course in Miracles says this: forgiveness is a major step in the journey to atonement. Okay? Well, why would that be so?
Well, if you're forgiving, you're not judging.
Well, the first step is this: if you look at most people along their spiritual evolution. When they talk forgiveness, I'll give you an example. I told you when I was younger and I was engaged and my fiance slept with my brother. Okay. And I tried to deal with that. At that moment, I tried to overlook it. We stayed together for another year afterwards. Things were never quite the same. Okay. All right. It just didn't seem to work out. But I remember hearing myself back then say, now I was only in my early 20s back then, so you know my understanding today is a lot different than it was then. But I remember hearing myself say to her, I can forgive you, but I can never forget.
That's like an oxymoron.
It is. It's a total oxymoron. And what it was the intellectual ego speaking. I'm going to be so big that I can overlook this indiscretion and still put up with you. No. The idea was there was really no forgiveness. There really wasn't. It was an intellectual thing. I was just speaking. I was speaking empty words. At times I tried, but they were, for the most part, empty words. I don't know who said this, but it's been said. Forgiveness is forgetfulness. If you truly forgive, you have to erase the event. It doesn't exist any longer. That's real forgiveness. And that is the forgiveness that all of us would experience when we reach atonement. When we were one with our Creator again, you would experience something where everything is erased. You know, when the Bible talks about grace, what is grace? I think we got this down, so I'm going to erase all of this. Because we're going off into a different area that I didn't know we were going to go into, but here we are into grace. What is grace?
Unearned favor.
Now, we're going to jump ahead here. And we're going to get into the now again. In terms of the now, remember we just looked at the unified field? The unified field, where it's all together, all one.
Can we just back up for 1 second?
Go
I'm
ahead.
still kind of stuck on this thought that we're supposed to forgive and forget. I mean, is it not evolving then that the ideal state would be a catatonic state of a coma where you don't react, you don't think, you don't plan, you don't...
No.
What?
Then you would interact. See, the difference between reacting and interacting are
Just
two different states of
being
consciousness.
An observant lump, just sitting in a corner meditating,
No.
that would seem to be almost the ideal state then, isn't it?
No.
Okay.
No, you're going to go sit in a corner and be the lump. You're not going to experience anything. You're not going to experience the beauty of creation. Creation was created to be experienced. But you're going to experience it one of two ways. You're going to experience it either awake or asleep. What you just described to me, reacting to things and being in the world and judging things, that's the asleep state. That's what you're looking at in the world. People are reacting every single day. But that is death.
And I guess just to sit in a corner like a lump, that's more or less asleep too. That's not really living or being.
It's not really, no. As a matter of fact, I looked at that at one time. I kind of withdrew from the world for a while. I truly did.
Well, that'd be like Buddha going off and meditate in a cave.
Yeah, which Buddha did for a while. But then he didn't stay there. He went back into the world. And what was he doing? He was sharing understanding with the world on a day-to-day basis. He wasn't reacting to the world, but he was interacting. Excuse me.
In the
Christ
world,
was
not of the
interacting with the world. He interacts with it. You interact with creation rather than react to creation. It's a whole different experience. But most of us are not really too familiar with the awakened state. Okay, we haven't had a lot of practice in this world. For most people, what they have created for themselves, they've created a default system which is going to be reactive. Every given moment, the experience I shared with you today was a reactive moment. I know it was. I was like even in that moment aware of the fact that I was having a reactive moment, and I was looking at myself and saying, "Oh yeah," but it was so strong that I allowed it to continue for a moment. I allowed myself to have it, even though I knew I was being caught up in it. Then I can let it go. Because in the now, and that's where I started to go with the unified field again. I mean, I'm jumping back and forth, all right? And I'm getting deep and I'm coming back, all right? But the unified field, the past, the present, and the future, of course, all of these, in terms of the unified field, are all happening now. Okay? So what does that mean? See, this is where grace comes into play. In the now moment, are we subject to linear time? If we're awake? No. You don't think so? I don't either. Because you're not. The past has no bearing on the now. Unless you bring it up. Unless you incorporate it into this moment. Unless your memory becomes a part of this moment. Has no bearing here. So, let's say I died today. Yesterday. Last week. 10 years ago. But right now, I'm not carrying any of that. I left it gone. It's gone. Okay? It's finished. I'm not gonna bring it with me. Does it have any bearing on me?
You can't grow if you do that. My ex-husband used to do that to my one son. He goes, "We did this. I was like, "He's already been punished. Don't bring it up. Talk about right now. What we're talking about.
Just now.
It's not gonna change if you keep going."
And we do this with relationships all the time. And that's exactly what I was talking. That's exactly what I was talking about with forgiveness. In terms of the Course in Miracles, it says that forgiveness is a major step towards the atonement. At the end of the Course in Miracles, and when we're done with this book, I'm going to do just a section for teachers. I'm not going to go into that whole book because it's so much, you know. But we'll touch on this section for teachers, and we'll touch on the highlights and the most important aspects of it. But it talks about in the end, when you get towards the very end of the Course, it says really, forgiveness is not necessary. When you become awakened, you become so much aware of the now moment that forgiveness would be something that belongs to the sleeping state. Right? You wouldn't have to forgive if you could just forget it. If you forget it, it's not necessary to forgive it. You see? But in terms of our evolutionary minds, you know, in terms of the ego developing, it's a positive step. All right, two people, my brother and my mother. My brother and my mother didn't speak for 3 years. Literally, for 3 years. Because of something that my sister-in-law said to my mother, and so my brother and mother didn't speak for 3 years. I couldn't get in the middle of it. You know? I mean, wow, this is crazy stuff. But when they could let go of it, it's finished. She could have died before it was finished. And we can do that. We, all of us, are in charge of how long we hang on to something.
But you know, and that's an oxymoron too, because in the Catholic Church, you're not supposed to receive communion until you've forgiven your brothers of all their transgressions. But that's so typical of Catholics to hold these grudges.
Well, everybody, you know, I mean, the human mind, we see things our way and we want to be right. Okay? We want to.
That's what ego's all about.
That's what ego's about. Ego is I'm right, you're wrong. I'm going to challenge everyone, everything, and I have to be right. I got to be right. Well, of course, in Miracles says you can be right or you can be happy. Right? You want to be right. You want to be right. You can continue on this track and torment yourself, and you can get 90% of the world to agree with you. I'm right. I'm right. I'm right. See, I'm going to go out and get everyone to prove that I'm right. Everybody's in agreement. I got more people on my side than you got on yours. I got to be right. See, they all agree, even though they all don't know what they're talking about. They're on my side. So anyway, that basically what we're talking about here. This is the moment of choice. This is the some difference between life and death. Life is the unified field where we recognize God and I are one. I and the Father are one. That's what Christ came here to teach man. But I and the Father are one means you and the Father got to be one too, because God is the summation. Namaste. I recognize the divinity in you because I can't see it in me if I don't see it everywhere. But when I see it in me and I see it everywhere, now I understand that even if somebody else is asleep, what does that have to do with my experience? Do I have to get sucked into losing who and what I am and create this separation between me and God? See, again, there is no separation in terms of ultimate reality. It's separating only here. I'm here, you're there. I'm me, you're you. And you're evil. No. But the idea is we create these things in our minds, and then the universe is going to give us an experience to validate even our erroneous assumptions. Kind of hard to break out of this. It's the hardest thing anyone's ever going to face, is to awaken to their true spiritual nature. It's the hardest thing. It takes tremendous. First of all, you have to have a little understanding in order to create the desire to become vigilant. Because if you don't work at it, it's certainly not going to happen. This is where I got to look at the Christian religions have really dropped the ball, and they're not helping people become awake enough that they make conscious choices. They believe they don't have to do anything. Thank you, Jesus, I'm saved. It's not going to happen. They're going to be in for a rude awakening at some point and find that they could have had a VA. But anyway, I think that we all understand that what is being presented here is awake and asleep, good and evil, yada, yada, yada. Now we'll get deeper into the book and see where we go. Because the next section is called The Journey Home. Wow. Interesting. Where is home? And how do you get there? Ask anywhere, ask it, and people, this is interesting. I mean, we do it all the time. Where are you from? Especially in Florida. Where are you from? Where are you from? People ask me, where are you from? And my pat answer is, in this world? Because it's kind of like a game, but it helps me stay centered. When I respond that way, when somebody says, where are you from? And I say, in this world? Well, now I'm reminding myself, I'm a spiritual being, this is not my home. I know what they mean, of course, you know, I'm not that stupid. But they look at you a little funny, like. So then sometimes we'll open the door, we have a discussion, other times I just tell them, hey, I'm from Massachusetts, that's, you know, and that's the end of that. But this is about each of us staying centered. And whatever you can use to help you remember your spiritual nature, you're going to forgo looking at things with the ego mind. Right?
I've got a question. We have a resident that I know of. He's really heavy. I don't think he can fit in the bathtub, and he has an odor. So right before we came here, we had to write a letter. So are we saying that, you know, he's got to fix the situation, but are we judging him?
Well, you know,
Observing for sure.
I would say observing it. I mean,
I have to write emails as part of my job. I write emails on people. I'm judging them, but I'm not doing it from an unloving. I'm doing it as part of life and part of my, you know, work. But I always do it with the loving, as much thinking as loving as I can of that person, and trying to focus on the good while having to bring up the not so good.
You know what? You brought up a point, because in the letter I said it's not fair that his caseworker allows him to live like that. They should do something to compensate his handicap. Maybe. I don't know. See, I'm struggling with that right now. Judge it.
well, you know, remember the monk that they asked him, what did you do before you became enlightened? He said, I chopped wood and carried water. And now what do you do that you're enlightened? I chop wood and I carry water. It's not what you do. It's where you're at when you're doing it. Like, for example, the one who comes to me and says, where are you from? In that moment, I say, in this world? Well, in that moment, that conversation to me, I'm listening to spirit, and I'm thinking spiritual, I'm going beyond my human self, and no matter what comes, for me, I'm having a moment of being spiritually connected. Maybe that person's not awake and aware of who and what they are. That's irrelevant to me. What is relevant to me is, where am I at?
What's your answer if they say, not from this world?
Well, then I would say, well, okay, this is interesting. I would say,
And then they just open up a whole can of worms.
I would say, well, you know, in the Gospel of Thomas, Jesus spoke of, when they ask you where you're from, to say, I'm from the light. And I would say, I'm from the light. I am from that which is aware of the totality of all things being a universal consciousness. I am God's son, as you are.
You're from the light. Well, that would be an interesting.
That would open up a whole can of
Oh,
worms.
yeah. No, I've responded that way, trust me.
It's so funny because you say, where did you land from? I said, Mars. I'm going to say, oh, I'm from the light.
Yeah, and then see how many responses you get to that.
Ginger will tell you, there's occasions when I just say things to people, I don't know what I'm going to say, and sometimes just things come out.
You know what I said to a gentleman who's leaving your ice cream parlor? Was it coming in? I said, oh, you're leaving before the services? And Gary said, why did you say that? I said, well, what if he had listened to me? I would have explained. He would have gone back in. But he was obviously hard of hearing, so.
Actually, most people just ignore that because they've already picked up the book. And it's already
He was
not
just
what
acting
they
like he was that
agree
way.
with.
Oh, really?
And you wouldn't believe some of the things people say to Bruce, you would not believe. Or about Bruce.
Well, that's okay.
Or some of the things that come out of his mouth to people. Oh, I'm from the light. And just walk away and
That one was saying
they're
that.
like, what do you say? He's from the light. Check
I
out
want the ice cream he's having.
I want the kind of ice cream he's having. That's pretty funny.
Well, no, I went Saturday night to my women's group where we had a couple of psychics there, and we did meditation and the whole bit. And then they believe they're spiritually awakened because they have the psychic ability, and And I know, and it's
And you're standing
like,
over there with more information than they have going, poor bastards.
I know, I'm going, and, you know,
But that's a judgment, I know.
I know.
I do it regularly.
And I was,
It's okay, yeah, it's part of what is.
And until they're looking for that spiritually awakenedness, nothing you say is.
no,
gonna
because
get
there's a
through.
couple of them I'm very close to, and I have begged them to come here, and they're just not going to do it. And I know they're just not ready
It's
for
totally
it.
against their conditioning.
Right, but I will say this is exciting that happened on the sidebar. I've had for a good 6 weeks pain in my shoulder. Pretty good pain. I thought I hurt my rotator cuff. I was working out and I thought I should, hurt it or at least pull a muscle. Well, this one woman who worked with energy, she had me on the bed, and she was directing energy, and she goes, "Do you have any place that needs any particular work?" I said, "Yeah, my shoulder." I said, "I hurt it." I said, "I think I pulled a muscle." She goes, "No, it's not physical." She goes, "Do you share an office with anyone?" And I said, "Yes." And she goes, and she said, She goes, "And is she sit to your left?" And I said, "Yes."
Oh, she's a drain on
And
your
she
energy.
she goes, "And is she experiencing an enormous amount of stress right now?" Yeah. She goes, you were taking on her energy, and that is how you have
She's
this.
recharging
You
from
know,
you.
since that night, there's been no pain in my shoulder. It is wild to me, absolutely wild.
That's cool. That's a cool story.
Her.
I have her card at home. I didn't
Gary's
let her-
got jaw pain.
Well, she's great. I was so impressed. So, yeah, I'll give
Heck yeah, that was a Kodak moment.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
There's energy.
and I mean,
There
I
is.
love this lady. It's not like I dislike her. I care for her very much. But
she
she's
won't come
under,
here.
well, no. Well, no, she wouldn't come here. But she's under enormous amount of stress. Her mother passed away, and
Yeah,
she's
that should be-
lonely.
I know this sounds rude.
Because we see it differently than she does.
Right.
And I can't get her to see it that way. And she's made some bad decisions at work that really that ended up
Paying
making
for
her,
it.
yeah, having a lot of extra work dumped on her the way she chose to handle things. And she's living there 24/7, and she's absolutely stressed.
And she did that for you.
And well, I've done that for me. She intentionally, we're gonna put pain in your arm, you know what I mean?
Oh no, I thought you were talking
She's
about
talking
the
about
lady
the
that.
Oh, the therapist. Without me giving any information, she didn't know me, I didn't know her. She extracted all that, and then the pain's been gone.
That's cool. And
No.
get an amen.
Now, remember when we start talking about a unified field in terms of ultimate reality? In terms of the illusionary world,
See you later.
in terms of the illusion,
Good evening. Thank you.
it still is, the illusion is still part of a unified field. In terms of ultimate reality, there is no separation. So someone who has psychic powers, they're clairvoyant. Of course that's available. It's
They're just
available
on a
to,
different frequency.
they're attuned to certain things that the next person's not. Doesn't mean that they are special. Well, in a way they're different. They're different than other people. Each of us in this room is different. We all have different characteristics. We all have different talents in certain ways. But in terms of ultimate reality, we're still all interconnected to the whole.
But you know what the difference is? And I think that we're all psychic. I think that
Well, we are.
the more you meditate, the more you take time to yourself. Like when Jesus went out on the boat, when you take time, some people think, let's work at a frenzy, work at a frenzy, work at a frenzy. No, you don't do that. What you do is you do, and then you step back and you meditate and you pray and you claim and you go on to the next one. It's like we went to some places for furniture and nobody had furniture. So I stepped back, I didn't panic, and I prayed about it. Then we got more furniture. So I think we're all psychic, but we don't take the time to meditate.
We haven't been conditioned to do that.
Yeah, it's
They're being
funny.
conditioned to hurry up, get it done, get it
They
done,
throw
go to the
it
next
out.
one, get it done right now, do it.
That's like one time I went to Bible study, they said, did you read the newspaper this morning? Yes. Well, then you're of the world. Did you read your Bible? No, I didn't have time to. People make more time to read the newspaper than they have to read the Bible.
Can't understand the dang Bible.
Yeah, that's
My
part
problem
of
is I
it.
can't understand it. I don't read it, confuses me.
Well, when we're done here, you should be able to read the Bible, read any aspect of it, and understand every part
That
of
was
it.
my problem. I just
Absolutely.
Which version are you reading? Read the New
King
International.
James.
No, that's why.
And
Read
the only one.
No, read the New International version. You'll be able to
What were
understand
you
it.
saying?
Oh no, I don't remember his name. Kinchin. He was running. He's out of the running now for president.
Kucinich.
Kucinich. I had an article, and I had it in my pocket, but it was my work pocket. I don't have it in here. Where he had, how he got hooked up with the girlfriend that he's with right now. And essentially, he had put it out to the universe, is his words. And then that afternoon he met her. And of course, everybody likes to laugh at him, make fun of him. Oh, the guy who believes in aliens, and they make fun of him.
No.
And he's the only one that's kind of close to me.
Got
And
it straight.
he's having
He's
his
right.
way.
What they do.
He's
What
on
they
the
do.
line.
He has some considerable spiritual support out there. I've heard other people online stuff talk about him, even in the last election. But among the public, he's got 2% or something.
Yeah, because they're against, he's definitely standing
He's not
for.
mainstream.
And he's not,
Exactly,
he's a short,
not
little,
mainstream.
not very attractive guy.
Yes, that
And,
doesn't help.
and I think I saw maybe once on TV, his wife is tall and attractive.
Right.
And they seem kind of mismatched, but.
Right.
Well, they're not
Very
matched
happy.
anymore since he got a new girlfriend from the
Well,
university.
I think it is
No,
his
that's-
wife now.
Oh, the same one?
Yeah, that's,
Oh, cool.
yeah, that's.
I don't know anything about it because I'm not voting because I think it's all a bunch of crap to put in there, get one in there to start with, and it makes no difference when I vote.
Did you vote yesterday?
No.
Oh, I did.
Oh, yesterday. Oh, was it early? Right in? Oh, okay. Just hey, wait, we didn't miss it.
Something that Megan said, you know, the quicker we go, sometimes we create obstacles, if you will, and things that are going to get in our way. The Portuguese have an expression, the faster I move, the slower I go.
The faster I go, the behinder I get.
There you go. Well, if we look, now let's look at, again, how creation works in terms of linear time, because we're in a dimension of linear time.
We have to deal with it.
Right here. When you have a thought, that thought is the starting point where you've moved energy. Okay? Remember I talked about this thing that I just experienced at Sam's Club where the tax situation, I had a couple of years ago had this problem, so I wanted to alleviate the problem. I didn't want to get the problem thrown at me again, so the one who came up to scan, I specifically said, oh, that's tax exempt. Okay, now what is my originating thought? I'm going to have a problem here, and I'm going to stop the problem. Then I go, and she says, well, just tell the cashier, and I told the cashier, oh, that's tax exempt. Now I just reinforced the belief that I'm going to have a problem. Right? That's exactly what happened. What happened? I wound up with a problem. Okay? All right? That was my originating thought. I created the problem.
So if you hadn't thought about it,
Had I not thought about that, I would not have brought that particular
Energy.
situation because I set the energy into motion.
And you can't even say, okay, I'm not going to have a problem, because then you're saying I
Right.
might have a
setting the
problem.
stage for the problem.
Right. So now here's the difference between being and non-being. Now, in our sense of non-being, in our moment of non-being, we're still experiencing. I was experiencing. I didn't like the experience, but I was experiencing. Now, if I didn't have that originating thought, and I was simply just being present, I would still be walking to the cashier. I would still be interacting in the moment, but the energies would all be different.
They'd be settled instead of stirred up.
You see where Gary was saying before, talking about, well, we're going to go sit in the corner of the cave. No, you don't sit in the corner of the cave. You just be.
So can we should we try to condition ourselves each day, perhaps through meditation, to get ourselves in the right loving, creative state of mind, so that these negative concerns, these negative thoughts that, as you alluded to, we shouldn't even bring up into our mind, so that we can keep them out, so that we can just be
It's the
loving and
hardest
creative.
thing on the planet to try.
It is the hardest thing, but yes and yes.
Focus.
But that's what
That's
happened
our
to me
job.
this morning. We woke up late, remember?
It's our job.
That's what the whole point of it is.
You wonder what are people doing in this world? They're learning how to do exactly what you just said. That's why we've come here. We've learned, each and every one can enter this world to become a master.
You know, there's a saying, and I don't know, it's like the footprint saying that everybody knows, footprint in the sand. It's like God said, did you have to take time to pray this morning? And then the answer was, no, Lord, I read the newspaper, got the children to school, got myself dressed, and I didn't have time to pray. And he goes, and there's your problem. You should have prayed first. I don't know what the whole saying, but that's the gist of it.
Well, whether we pick up a Bible and pray, whether we sit in bed, or whether you just go into a meditative state under a tree, whatever works, whatever you're using to clear your attachment to all of the form that we create, that's what's necessary. This is why a Buddhist could have the experience of being, just like the Christian could have.
Yeah, that's not being.
The Christian could have, the Buddhist could have. The atheist, who doesn't really believe in God, but just knows this: I believe that somehow I have to coexist with all of this,
Well,
whatever it is.
Even no matter what your beliefs are, if you think positive, you have a much more awakened life than if you go through life thinking negative.
Well, positive is going to bring you more of a positive experience.
Right.
It's not necessarily going to bring you
I agree.
into the awakened state.
Right.
Because you're still thinking, you can't see things as positive
Yes,
versus
because that's
negative.
judgment.
Because if you do, you're reinforcing that dualistic view. But if you look at it in terms of love,
Hello.
what is love?
God.
God. What is not God?
Everything is
It's
God.
all God. Now, if you look at it as God is unconditional love and it's all part of God, now interact with each moment as though you're exchanging this moment with God. Doesn't matter whether this person's slapping you in the face.
You get to enjoy a whole lot
You know?
more of the reality doing it that way than having a dualistic view of things.
This is what Christ was really trying to teach man to do. Someone slaps his cheek, you turn the other one. Because this person doesn't know who they are, forgive him, he's being
They
held
don't
to the
know what
cross.
they do.
Forgive them, they don't know what they're doing. You don't react to someone who's asleep, or you will lose yourself
And trying to get them.
in that moment.
So our job is to be in this loving, creative state at all moments. And I think we've probably all experienced that from moment to moment, where whether it's seeing a flower, whether it's an idea, whether it's something creative we've done, something good, or something creative or loving, we probably all experience that some occasional moments and know what a good feeling that is.
Then you
And
think
that's what
about
we're-
it and it's gone.
Try to be in that state all the time.
Exactly.
You're dealing with the cashier or whatever you're doing, and you probably would be putting out these good vibes, and hopefully all this good stuff comes back to you, and much less of the problems out there that we might otherwise encounter.
You will find that if you call for unconditional love, you've done your job. If you call for it. Now, doesn't mean that you're going to remain centered and call for it every minute. But
Bruce can attest to that.
I can attest to that, and I will. I mean, you know,
Call for unconditional love from other people, or you mean call for it to come
From you.
Only
yourself?
From you.
unconditional love is your
this is
reaction.
about you.
Yeah.
Right,
It's always about us.
right.
That's why I say I can't make anyone in this world become anything that they're not choosing, nor do I wish to. Okay? Because of this. Oh,
Judge.
judgment. Judgment is the only thing that's going to pull me.
Well, let me ask you a question. What's the difference between judgment and, this is the biggest thing I'm trying to learn, judgment and reality?
Discernment.
That's
Judgment
what I
and
keep saying.
discernment.
Well, let me say this, and it's very, very difficult for us to, it's very, very difficult to discern the origin of something until you recognize this, that love and fear are the only states that you can experience, A or B. You can't experience anything other than awake or asleep, or love or fear. Either, now this love is the unified field.
I think that what Megan is saying is in her job, she has to make judgment calls.
Well,
And she's trying to
Yeah, I
find the
understand.
difference
Yeah, I
between
understand
her
that.
discerning and judging the situation.
well, first of all, if you're looking at it and you're judging it, you're already in your ego mind.
Right.
Okay, one, this is interacting,
Or reacting.
interacting or reacting.
Hello, ladies.
If we're interacting from love, there is no fear. Okay, there's no fear when you're interacting, and it doesn't matter. See, it doesn't matter what someone else is doing. It doesn't matter what the world is doing. The world could blow itself up, and there's a perfection in what the world is doing. The moment I have an attachment to, I gotta go out and fix the world, I'm reacting to it. It's coming from my ego mind. Now, if Spirit says to me, this person asks where you're from, and I say I'm from the light, in that moment, okay. All right? I didn't know I'm going to say this. I'm not thinking. This is one of the things that Christ talked about when he was talking about that state of being. He said, and again, this was a metaphor to represent a day-to-day moment. He said, you're going to be taken before council. Don't think beforehand what you're going to say. He said, if you think beforehand what you're going to say, that's coming from evil. Why? Because it's going to be a reactive thing from ego based on judgment.
Say it's coming from evil or from
Ego.
Well, he said evil.
Okay.
Okay, evil,
That's the same as ego.
which is the same as ego,
Okay, interchangeable.
they're interchangeable.
That's true.
Okay,
because
it is.
When my parents were getting divorced, they lined up all our children, and they said, they asked me something, and they said, well, why are you sitting behind your father? I said, I don't, I speak for the truth. And they go, then we don't have to tell you what to say. And I was the only one that was not coached what to say.